Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Matt Dobbs, your host for today's discussion. With me are David Etue, the CEO at Cyberbit, Jordan Lamoreaux, Director of Cybersecurity Incident and Threat at Banner Health, and Chris Gastardi, Director of Technology at Cybervance. And today's topic is AI consumes technical tasks. What is left for SOC teams? So today we're going to be discussing how artificial intelligence is reshaping the SOC today and how it will redefine the SOC of tomorrow. So let's just get right into the discussion. And Jordan, what tasks are already being automated by AI today?
Yeah, so right now, typically, no, most SIMs, you've got either Splunk or CrowdStrike, they have their own internal AI agents. So, for example, CrowdStrike's at Charlotte AI. So, how I'm seeing them being implemented, even how we're building this in-house, is actually like fulfilling the true promise that SOAR made almost a decade ago of actually doing through and through automation and efficiencies by bringing together correlating data and providing context to where, a good chunk of the analytic deep diving that your analysts would typically have to do is pretty much presented to the analyst to at the point of basically just making a decision, block, unblock, false positive or whatnot. So again, really fulfilling the promise that we were all sold, when SOAR was coming into the marketplace. So, which and that, so that's in the analytics space for the SOC analyst. But keep in mind too, like the leadership, with AI, you can have your second brain. So for if you're the pen test lead, those reports can basically be automated. You provide, the findings, the finding matrix, and then how, depending on how well you have it built, the agent will just make your pen test report and pump out an executive summary, and it's good to go, which allows you to have more time in the fight, as we say, less time and administrative overhead. So it's a combination both for the individual contributors and the actual people leaders.
And and to continue on that thought, and Chris, look to you next. So which SOC roles do you see that are changing the fastest?
Yeah, I really appreciate what was said earlier in the second brain, and it really does come back to the automation piece. We think about the just the large amounts of data that we're faced with every day, the enormous amount of alerts. The alert triage piece is one that we see quite often changing, and we'll speak specifically to the tier one. If we're looking at enrichment, the deduplication, where we're focusing on much of the alerts coming through on the SIM and then pivoting over to the host-based investigations. Summarization, we see that quite often being very much heavy on the AI side. But the enrichment of the data that's coming in, if we have AI proposing, containment and trying to execute decisions, is the human actually the one that's actually approving, what those proposals are? And so it really comes back to the judgment. I think we see the work that many of us for years have, really learned manually. I always say, start at the bottom and automate our way up. I know I was taught the manual way first, whether it was KQL writing or query writing. That work, burns people out, and we see that more and more. And we see a lot of that being replaced, at least at that tier one level, by AI. So I think that that's a big piece of it as data becomes much larger and our data sets are larger to look at. The initial look at that, but certainly when it comes to the ultimate decisions, that still needs to reside, with the human. And I believe as we touch on that second brain that Jordan talked about, I'll say all day today that AI is a force multiplier, but not necessarily a force replacer.
And and so we've talked about a few things where AI is helping things today. Where are where do you see where AI is overhyped versus underhyped? And then David, any thoughts from you on that one? And then we'll share that one with the
I
rest
say
of the
that
team.
could be a webinar in its own right. Yeah, what I think, the that the SOC with no humans is overhyped. That I think if your SOC can be replaced with AI, it's probably not a very sophisticated SOC, or you don't have very sophisticated adversaries. And so I think it's definitely, as we talked about, changed the shape of the SOC and the roles in the SOC, which will be for fun conversation. But I think that's overhyped. I also think that we are in a period where you say AI and everyone thinks LLM or GPT, and I think LLM's overhyped. I was talking with a SOC leader that I shouldn't name, but he was getting pressure from an executive team to use LLMs, and he said, "Well, if you want me to do it for 60% slower for double the cost, I'd be happy to switch to LLMs." That LLMs are important. They bring some really interesting capabilities, but there's small language models that are really good for parsing smaller, more defined text. There's machine learning. We've been dealing with AI and machine learning and cybersecurity for 10 plus years. NLP, some neuroscience agentic. I think LLMs are overhyped. What I think is underhyped is something Jordan mentioned is the AI tools in the tools you're using in the SOC today. I think some investment bankers are tracking 80 plus AI SOC startups, and I walked down an aisle at RSA, and there was like 7 of them in one aisle, and the market can't support that number of players, so there's going to be consolidation. But I think what you'll see is the large players have woken up on AI, and with the from Microsoft to Palo to Cisco to CrowdStrike, that the AI initiatives that are going on in their products that are in many cases just free features that you get, I think are underhyped, and something that is going to make a big impact in how people work over the next year.
Chris or Jordan, any thoughts on the hype, whether over or under?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, and it's kind of reiterating, what David said is, and a little bit of what Chris is like. So 2 points. It's not gonna. So in healthcare, liability, that's the name of the game. You cannot have decisions being made by an AI agent, because at the end of the day, someone has to be tangibly liable, whether through fines or being fired, for decisions, because you can have real world consequences to patient impact, and potentially, lives lost. So you're not going to, see the workforce disappearing. You'll see it now altering. And to Chris's point, being a force multiplier, if efficiencies free up resources in the SOC, well, our adversaries have AI too. So they're getting just as proficient with AI and efficient in their own. And so we would just simply shift our resources. I mean, we didn't touch on my background, but I'm retired military. And the Marine Corps, we had a saying, every Marine is a rifleman. So my SOC analyst, if I have now, 5 agents per SOC analyst, I've freed up a few of them. I'm now going to have them on my threat intel team. I'm going to try to shift my focus to be more, fight them over there before we fight them over here, outside my perimeter, with good threat intelligence, good pen testing, in order to shift all my resources left of the boom to keep them as far away from my actual perimeter as possible. We're still going to be growing, even as more AI consumes more and more parts of your traditional SOC threat model.
Yeah, Jordan, you and I share a similar background, military, and I was, law enforcement, counter intel, and the whole game of that is just the adversary trying to look normal and trying to blend in, and that's more from the human, side of things, human intelligence, but that certainly translates to what we see now. Thinking of, living off the land, very much the same. We look at SOCs now trying to kind of relearn the hard way, where the adversary is blending in. It's the same type of concept. They're not tripping the typical alarms because they're using the native binaries, living off the land with what we're using day to day to actually survive. Going back to what you had mentioned earlier about what is overhyped, often you see this overpromise and underdelivery that it's the new autonomous SOC. And a lot of times the technical task, I think, we see people kind of have the Mario Brother effect where they level up. I think we're seeing that is the technical task, and we're kind of pushing people up a level. Maybe they're not even ready for it, but the work's not disappearing. It's really kind of moved to the parts that we see that AI is not the greatest at, and what it can't really reliably do today. Handle the genuinely novel attacks, reason through something like a Volt Typhoon adversary, living off the land, where everything is looking legitimate, and really that accountability piece, Jordan, that you're talking about, or just know when it's confidently wrong.
Well, that makes an excellent segue into our next segment, where we've talked a lot about what the AI can and can't do. Let's move the discussion on to the humans still in the SOC. And Chris, I'm going to open with you. So as we see AI handling more of the investigations, what skills matter most today in the SOC?
Yeah, so I think it still comes down to an awareness of the environment. You have to know the environment that you're operating in. A lot of the work that I used to do in the law enforcement side with our partners, if it was anything that was related to like personnel protection, we had to go into the environment well ahead and know the environment, understand what were the vulnerabilities of that particular space. And that would lead us to judgment so that in the middle of an actual event, we would know if there was something that was, off kilter, that was away from the baseline. There's this old saying that you have to know normal in order to identify abnormal. And so that judgment piece is critical. And it really comes down to judgment under stress, under simulation of conditions that match, what you're seeing. And I go back to a lot of the work that we've been doing here at Cybervance with DHS, Department of Homeland Security here in the U.S., and specifically with CISA, as we're focusing a lot on triaging alerts from network telemetry and looking at sophisticated threat actors like Volt Typhoon, like Salt Typhoon, focusing in on that living off the land. You don't have malware to detonate. You don't have the usual things that are in play that would be a typical alert. And so that awareness of what is normal in the environment, being able to understand the context and the judgment, the pivoting. The biggest thing that we see over this past year, where we've had thousands of people come back and say, I understand what an alert looks like from the SOC, but then when I pivot to that host and I start looking at host-based data, whether it's event logs, registry for in a Windows environment, what is that actually telling me? What is the evidence of something like execution actually telling me at the artifact level? And so knowing that environment, going back to that, understanding what things like evidence of execution, whether it's something like prefetch, or we're looking at evidence of file and folder opening, you have to have that baseline awareness and then be able to work through those situations in environments that actually simulate real world scenarios.
Now, so you do bring up an excellent point about needing to understand the details behind the alert. And as AI is taking on a lot of these low-level tasks, where do we see our junior analysts these days? Do we see this role disappearing? And if we do, where do we expect the next generation to gain these technical skills if AI is taking over a lot of those opportunities to investigate?
So,
And then
I wouldn't,
Jordan,
I
yeah.
wouldn't say, yeah. So I wouldn't say they're going to be disappearing, and kind of backing up a little bit to the technical skills, because you still, one, your entry level SOC job is always going to be an excellent feeder to other opportunities throughout your entire, cyber organization. And because at that level, when you're in the trenches per se, you get a fundamental understanding of, to Chris's point, what normal looks like. But then doing that troubleshooting, that analytic journey, and that life cycle, which a lot of people they just go straight into the higher level positions like engineer. Like if you just went straight from college into being a sim engineer or a red team, like how are you going to really understand the fundamentals of circumventing, the defense team if you've never sat in that chair? So the SOC is always going to be a good feeder. And when it comes to the technical skills, like you still need to understand the fundamentals. Like for example, going back to my military experience, we did land nav annually, and at every stages of training, you were always going to at some point get tossed in the middle of nowhere with a compass and a map because GPS is a widget. Widgets come and go. It's the same
Yeah.
thing like with Charlotte AI. Didn't pay the bill, couldn't get renewed. It comes, that's a widget. And technologies come and go, so you need to still have the fundamental understanding of what does normal look like, to Chris's point, and then how can we still effectively defend our enterprise without certain widgets.
David, any thoughts on the junior analyst role?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll likely see a reduction in the number of junior analysts, but definitely not going away. Like I think today the SOC is a pyramid, and I think we'll see a SOC that is a diamond, that will less tier ones, more to tier twos, similar or maybe more tier threes, or at least a different role in tier three around, we're going to have an AI control plane and AI governance that someone's going to have to learn to do. And I think that probably aligns to, some of the tier three skill set. The things that I think are really interesting is, as we look at who we hire, your technical skills will matter. That if you don't understand an adversary, it's hard to defend against them, and that's going to require some technical expertise. But I think the other parts that we have to think about as we start to identify talent is, one is automation thinking. Like, if you think about a threat hunting team today, a great threat hunting team doesn't just find unknown things. They create detections that make sure that you find that thing in an automated way again in the future. So, that I think you measure a threat hunting team not on what they find, but on the detections they drive at scale. And I think we have to think that way across the entire SOC, that when a tier one or tier two analyst does a task or repetitive task, we have to have the thinking of like, hey, can that be automated? And AI is going to allow us to push that automation capability out of a detection engineering or SOC engineering team, into analysts, those functions. And I think that automation thinking is really important. The other part, I think to what Jordan said around, tier ones, like that's where historically our talent pipeline has come for more senior folks. And, if that number gets smaller, we're going to have to diversify recruiting into things like, DevOps, SRE, IT operations. And so, we used to hire tier threes based on their technical excellence, but the mentorship, and career coaching leadership responsibilities of them and the SOC leaders, I think, are going to become even more important over time. And so I think those are some areas where we're going to see some evolution separate of just the AI technical impact.
And on that same theme, we're talking about the profiles changing. What are some of the ideal new hiring profiles, and how will those evolve? What sort of talent would we be looking for when we're bringing in new team members to the SOC in the security organization?
Yeah, I think you're
Chris?
looking at the judgment. Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, I think the judgment piece is going back to that, as we look at the roles, using, kind of the analogy of putting people not just on the right, bus, but once they're on the bus, in the right seat. And so as we look at the talent, I believe before we get into any, technical or tool proficiency, it is going back to, investigative judgment, hypothesis-driven thinking, deep system and environment fluency. You can only spot anomalous if again, what normal is. I think about a lot of the work now as we look at identity being a huge topic right now, especially in the cloud space. How does Azure and Microsoft 365 log, and how does it behave day to day? So that deep environment fluency, before any tooling is ever talked about in a job interview, And then the orchestration, how do all these individual pieces actually fit together? That's a huge skill. That comes back to really, the fundamentals, not instead of them. So the deep, environment fluency, the investigative judgment, and then the orchestration itself is definitely a skill. It's something that allows folks to work on a team, but also when you've got multiple sources of data coming from the environment, log analysis being a big example of that, is how do we actually orchestrate that to paint a clear picture when there's an actual incident?
Yeah, and I definitely 100% agree with what Chris said because and it speaks to an aptitude and an intellectual curiosity. Because, like I had mentioned previously about reallocating resources to different various parts within my organization, and only someone that has the resiliency to be flexible in their career path is extremely important. And not many people have that, but then have that aptitude and those soft skills to be able to, communicate. Again, if you're hypothesis driven, you're doing a lot of investigative working, you need to have really, really good communication skills. And I do see that being somewhat of a challenge, for the younger generations, and especially understanding the fundamentals when a lot of the technology that we use day to day just simply works. I mean, like I don't want to date myself so much, but back when I got my first computer, if I wanted to play a video game, I had to create a boot disk. All right. Things you just now, my kids, my 10-year-old just goes on to Steam, downloads a new game, and he's good to go. And so that's where, like, I mean, not to give you guys an early plug, but that's where like companies like Cyberbit has a plethora of resources in education to actually really grasp and understand those fundamentals where, it may not be practically applicable or available in the current like in production working environment.
Definitely appreciate the plug there, Jordan.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll add one. I think what Chris and Jordan said is spot on. I'll add, one little kind of addition to it is, I think it's a learning mindset and experimentation. If someone shows up for a job interview and tells you that they're an expert in how to build and run an AI-enabled SOC, they're lying. That expert doesn't exist yet. They will, years from now, but we've always required learning mindsets in cybersecurity. I think what makes cybersecurity so much fun is that we have an adversary that innovates every day, and that keeps us on our toes. And now not only do we have that innovating adversary, we have our technology environments. The tools we use to defend, the tools we're using to attack us, the IT environments and technology environments that our organizations operate in, all changing. And so, that people who think if someone believes they know the answer and isn't open-minded to change, we're heading into a really difficult time for them. And learning mindset, experimentation, being comfortably being wrong, if as long as you're learning and making progress. I think that's a something we haven't had to put as high of a priority on in SOC hiring in the past and do now.
And Jordan, you had mentioned earlier about being in the healthcare industry, and there's certain decisions that only humans can make. Um, where do we see other types of decisions that will remain irreplaceable for humans to decide on?
Uh, Definitely when it comes to containment, for example, if a surgeon has, we've had this, actually scenarios happen where, a physician had, fell for phishing, and now they potentially have malware, but we can't just 100% contain them because they still need some marginal access for their patient's information because they're about ready to go into a surgery. And so containment is definitely one, or um, taking a human's laptop out of the equation, medical devices themselves. Again, like with Chris's earlier point, like asset inventory is so critically important. What is in your environment, and what is the downstream impact of all devices that you're working with? Because you could have critical second, third order impact if you take out a medical device without even being aware of it. We have a lot of devices that are made from and manufactured in various parts of the world, and sometimes they start phoning home to various parts of the world, and that's just out of the box how they are. But you have to sometimes literally, again, understanding the fundamentals, go and inspect this device at the actual facility because you can't just straight go out and contain. Even in what we would traditionally consider a very high confident alert that would warrant containment in the healthcare environment, there's too much impact, too much risk, and too much at stake. So that's just one example where I don't foresee at any point there not being any type of human in the middle.
Great insights. And so let's move to our next segment. I think that's an excellent point to pivot from. Talking about how we understand if our teams are ready for the AI world. And Chris, how do we know that, or how do you know that your team's prepared to make these decisions that are still requiring that human insight?
Yeah, sure. I think readiness often is, and historically has been a checklist. You think about certifications when you first, come into the industry. Once you're inside and actually doing the work, how many tickets have you closed? What tools are you currently operating? So I think, the checklist has been kind of the norm, and not knocking, any certs at all. I believe it's a good, baseline start. But it's that continuous evaluation, and going back to what I mentioned earlier, evaluation in environments that actually simulate, what you're doing, your day to day. So oftentimes, we have to ask folks, in this world now with AI being so prevalent, is, would your team, working together actually catch that machine in the enterprise on its worst day? Everything else really is noise. So that the work that we're seeing that AI is handling in modern day is no longer a measure of our people, but it's a measure, kind of David, what you had said of about the vendors. It's more become a measure of your vendors, and so that readiness is really shifting from the throughput to judgment under pressure. And so what that looks like is things like verification. That is it should be a reflex in our teams, not a step. A clean, confident verdict that comes by way of AI. That is another hypothesis for us to test. It's not a conclusion on its face, just to click and approve. And that matters, so much. We're seeing it in the digital forensics world as well, and especially for things that are going, into court. As there's this over reliance and doing that testing of the verification of what the AI generated and what is actually conclusive, because in that world we're talking about the difference of people's freedoms, for example, for things that are going to court. Also, back to the question on that as well, Matt, is really the how do folks actually perform under live pressure? And Jordan, I know I'm going to probably steal one of your lines here, but it's something that we both come from, is we have to train like we fight, and fight like we train. And that is, so, critical to what we see in today's SOC and forensics and IR world, is performing under pressure. What does a real incident look like, when we get around a team, a threat simulation? Matt, what you and your team are developing and working on with the live fires and the exercises that really simulate not just a scenario, but the systems, and promoting the teamwork that then leads folks to be able to explain why. So I've done all the work. We've gone through the process, but now the reporting, the articulation. So if our analysts, our investigators, if we can't actually articulate the reasoning and how we arrived at those conclusions, that's a true deficiency, right? And I think the last part, and I think what brings us here today, is it's not just one and done. It's maintained over time. Our skills in this world, in this industry, are extremely perishable, and we're seeing the decay being accelerated even much more, with AI. And so that's extremely important, is that you don't just show it once, but it's maintained and it's demonstrated over time, because we're holding folks that we are deemed to protect and defend at high industry standards and standardization, whether it's in the healthcare world, education, financial, but that also should translate down to the folks that are defending as well, that they're on a continuous cycle to maintain and improve.
Jordan, how about you? How do you determine if your team is ready? And I would like to even expand that, just beyond the technical skills, but both those technical and those soft skills of working together in teams.
Yeah, I mean, Chris definitely hit it out the park with, like with the tactical actions and readiness. So I'll piggyback off that and say that strategically, you know, the mandate is going to be SOC to start using AI. Because I've heard that it can, provide efficiencies and maybe save me some money and overhead. However, then the flip side of that, the SOC's going to be told to monitor and enforce AI policies. And right now, I'm seeing a lot of organizations are putting the cart before the horse. They're bringing in AI platforms, and now it's just kind of a free for all as each individual, whether it's IT infrastructure or the clinical side or the security side, identity access management side, everyone is starting to build out their own AI platforms for their own purposes. But do we have any governance behind it? What is the strategic vision that speaks to a policy? What standards are we going to follow that turn into control procedures, SOPs, and essentially, boundaries that the SOC is going to have to monitor and enforce for and abide by? So I think having that good governance and having the a reasonable expectation of AI coming down from the top down is the second piece of the dichotomy that Chris went into.
Yeah, I think at
Thank
a
you.
tactical level too,
Oh,
is we see, we're seeing right now, we're working on, having to, inject something that's wrong on purpose, and have the actual analysts go through, like, here's an enrichment summary, here's an output, you have to go through and actually validate and actually articulate, and look at something that is, plausibly incorrect from what was generated and measure, whether that analyst actually catches it, do they push back, do they verify? Because that's going to be the job now is being able to look at a product, what's coming out of AI and actually handing it to a human and actually allowing them to spot and really assess whether, what they are about to make a decision on is based on something that's factual and real.
Yeah,
and with all, oh, go ahead, David.
I just say is I think the team aspect I think is a big deal. It's like it's as formerly CEO of Rainforest and now CEO of Cyberbit, we get to see and talk to a lot of our customers about their exercises and the like. I remember an exercise. I'll let the company remain nameless, but someone was one of their remote employees was having connectivity problems, and they're like, we can't we can't start the exercise because Joe can't connect. I'm like, well, I don't think the adversary stops when Joe can't connect in the real world, and our ability to we succeed or fail as a team, and the smaller your team, the more the more to use a sports analogy, more utility players you have to have that someone can cover endpoint and network and identity, but the adversary doesn't go on vacation when we go on vacation, or that someone gets sick or has connectivity problems, and so the the ability for that team to form as needed, based on what's happening. I mean, I think shift changes are one of the most insightful things to learn from around readiness. The handing over an incident in process is probably the hardest thing to do in a security operations center. And when you're good at that, you tend to be good at most things. And I think it's a really insightful way to learn about your team. I'm also, by the way, a big fan of shift schedules that actually reduce the number of handoffs. Like, I love the Panama schedule because having longer shifts with fewer handovers reduces risk materially.
All right, so I'm going to have to ask. I'm not familiar with the Panama schedule.
Oh
What
boy.
is that?
I'm sure actually George or Chris could really do better justice. I run a number of SOCs with it, but it comes from the military that it's typically it's 12-hour shifts, 3 days on, 2 days off, 2 days on, 2 days off, and and so it reduced number of handoffs, and for someone for an employee, while you're working longer shifts, most people who run SOCs will maybe perhaps quarterly switch your 12 hours between day and night, but you drastically reduce the number of days that someone has to come to work. And so in return for some sacrifice in longer shifts and typically requiring a night shift, I can't remember the exact numbers, but you come to work like 30% less days than a 5-day a week employee. So it's the analysts tend to love it, and it significantly reduces the number of handoffs in a 12-hour shift versus an 8-hour shift.
It's definitely more efficient, but that last hour, if you're on the night, it is brutal.
Yes.
Well, I think this makes an excellent spot to ask for some predictions from each one of our distinguished panelists. So I'm going to ask this question, and I would like you to each answer. What's one SOC skill every security professional should start developing now for the AI era?
Well, again, I know this isn't like a technical SOC skill, but I really think public speaking, communications. I like organizations like Toastmasters. I came from finance. I was the managing director over the SOC at Charles Schwab previously, and I had a good chunk of my SOC analysts going into participating in Toastmasters to just understand how to read a room, how to navigate tense conversations with executives, VIPs, to be able to articulate and translate technical jargon per se to a non-technical audience is extremely, extremely critical, especially as we start reallocating resources to different various parts of whatever your cyber defense operating model is. And having that communication skills is extremely critical. And even if you think about like a regulatory audit perspective, sometimes you may get an issue or a finding or observation levied against you, and it's not because you're not doing the work. It's just the person that was communicating the work that you do couldn't get the message across in a way that was palatable enough to the auditor to be able to check that box as efficient. So communication, public speaking, I think that is very, very critical.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the movie that was on the flight coming in this morning, The Karate Kid, and it's going to be Focus, Daniel-san. So
yeah,
it's not it. Sweep the leg.
No, that's right. Yeah, I think focus. There is so much distraction right now. The modern SOC. I think the industry as a whole is really kind of built to destroy focus. The flooding alerts, the dozen panes of glass, all of that. Go after this new thing, chase this new shiny object, and that comes from the vendor side. We just got out of conference season, and there's a lot of different vendors that are kind of announcing the same message and doing the same thing, kind of a red ocean, if you will. And so I think the instinct is that we've got to keep up with all of it. And that's a true trap. So focus on that, Matt, I think is really the true discipline. I know it's not the big, technical skill, but focus is something that we've got to really make sure folks coming in on that they can, multitask. Absolutely. Not saying that we don't need to have folks in a multidisciplinary, multitasking frame of mind, but being able to focus, to sit with really one thread and follow it to the end without, getting off the lead. And I take that back to my own, previous work in law enforcement investigations. Cases got made by, staying on task and staying on the initial, what was the allegation long enough to start then developing patterns, and there's a lot of reaction right now. And so I think that really matters more than anything is, AI is handing you 10 plausible directions in a matter of just seconds, and so focusing is what lets us pick that that right one and go deep. And the machine is really kind of creating more breadth for freedom there, but the depth is really what is still our job, and that comes by way of by way of focus.
Like it
And
focus.
I love both of those. I'm going to I'm going to sort of answer the question. I think what I say is pick something of that matters going forward to be passionate about. I think there's there's a lot of skills that are needed. I don't think I think focus and communication and learning mindsets are probably are really critical ones. But I think as we look forward, the SOC is going to have validators. It's going to have people who do automation and integration. It's going to be people who are AI governors. It's there's going to be playbook owners. There's a number of different ways that AI is going to change the roles and responsibilities of what the SOC does. And I'd say pick one of those that you are passionate about and dive into it. I think things really cool about the changes coming is very few people wake up in the morning and go, man, I want to go process a lot of alerts today. And we have a large piece of our workforce that has to go do those things. And I think we're going to get the opportunity for them to do less and less of that over time. And so, how do you want to grow? We're going to change from the growth plan. Is probably not going to be tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's going to be we'll have specialization in those tiers, particularly in larger organizations. And so is being that human and human in or on the loop something that excites you? Is driving the automation excites you? Is learning AI and how it can be applied or how it needs to be governed excite you? And so I think picking one of those and being that you're passionate about and being great at it will be great for careers and for the folks that employ you, because we don't know any of these things. We don't have experts in any of these things yet, and they're all going to matter.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your insights. And so let's move on to the question and answer period. And for those in the audience, there should be a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen where you can type in your questions. And we won't be able to get to all of them today. But I would like to start with one. There's a question that says, that's asking, do you think internships, apprenticeships might be a good way to train people for tier 1 or tier 2 positions?
100% yes. Yeah, kind of going back to like how important the soft skills and that intellectual hunger is going to be, critical. You're going to be able to at least judge and ascertain that, not only via internships, but also through some junior organizations. So, for example, here locally in Arizona, we have a nonprofit called the Ginger Hacker Initiative. So it's about helping veterans get into cybersecurity. So there is a pre-vetting. Also, Women in Cybersecurity is another huge national organization. So I think mentorships through those type of programs, internships are going to be extremely critical because, again, as your defense organization becomes more and more sophisticated, I want to really only hire not only like, I don't want to say like the geniuses, the best of best. Yes, everyone wants their employees to be the best of best, but that long-term commitment, that investment, somebody that is going to be a really, really good cultural fit within your strategic vision, and again, as you can pre-vet that as much as possible, the better. So we leverage heavily at Banner Health internships, and they've been wildly successful.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that builds culturally. You get folks that come in early that are invested, and I think about previous working in investigations and starting out my federal career. Everyone always thought to get into that type of world, you had to be a former tier 1 operator working in the military, or a former, police officer, or a pen test, whatever it was. And what I found often was folks coming into those teams were from different disciplines and different backgrounds. And so even here at Cybervance, we're training junior analysts right now coming in for the summer. And they're not folks that came in with maybe the highest level of technical, cyber skills, but they came with, reasoning and open mind, being able to communicate what you had said, Jordan, earlier, just the communication aspect. And then from there, that mentoring that happens, through internships really gets a team that is invested in the culture and is really hopefully a group of folks that you can kind of still see as yours and invested more for the long term, not just someone that comes in that's pre-trained and has a checklist of skills, but isn't invested in the culture and the mission of the organization.
Great. Yeah, and I'll add on the for folks looking for opportunity that are early in their career. One of the really cool things that's happening is a number of states are building cyber cores, and Michigan and New Jersey have sort of led in creating these state cyber cores, and they're a really great way to experience, and also a place to partner and recruit from. Texas has formed the Texas Cyber Command, and that's creating a lot of change in Texas government, Texas public sector, and I probably get the entire list, but I think Maryland, Louisiana, Ohio, Wisconsin have also created these public sector entities that help deal with cybersecurity in kind of underserved public sector organizations, and that's a place where you can get really unique experience pretty quickly, and so a lot of SOCs are partnering with them for hiring their talent, for training, and it's a great place for folks starting out to go.
All right. And another question says, with next gen and AI enabled SOCs, where do these first level analysts shift into the organization? And I know, Jordan, you had talked about into some, maybe some threat intel positions. What are some other opportunities that you see for tier ones to move into?
Oh, you know what? That's a great question. And we didn't even get into constraints about building an AI SOC. Your supply chain. Your infantry can only advance as fast as your supply chain. And even I feel like this is probably the bane of my day-to-day existence right now is giving the governance piece, whether it be your legal team, your procurement team, your vendor management, your third-party risk management, them to actually understand the technology that you are building and implementing, and then being able to iterate. Because obviously with purchasing and budgets, there's built by design, bureaucracy and red tape, checks and balances. However, though, in a post-Mythos world, we may need to be updating our SIM instead of once every 7 years, maybe once every 3 years. Especially as the new wave of startups and technologies that can iterate quicker than some of the big five that have been around for the longest. And so having having the technical cyber professionals actually move into compliance, move into legal, move into privacy, move into some of those supply chain structures within your organization would be incredibly beneficial. I'm trying to build out my own, project management office that is just specific to cyber, just because we are iterating very, very quickly. Our technology is changing, and it is getting beyond what the traditional bureaucracy can allow. And speed and momentum wins the war. And you got to be able to quickly pivot with your technology stack, if necessary, on a dime. Because again, the adversaries, they don't have red tape. They just, oh, this weapon works. I'm going to pick it up and go. So yeah, so definitely in your supply chain, it would be areas where having those professionals move into would be very beneficial.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are almost at time. Chris and David, any last thoughts or comments that you would like to make before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I was just going to wrap up and just getting back to the piece of judgment, and I think the whole kind of underlying piece of this is the question is AI going to replace the human, and just don't forget that the human judgment layer, it doesn't go away, and it concentrates and gets more valuable. Looking at patterns, looking at multidisciplinary teams beyond the initial alert triaging to specializations. And David, I love what you said earlier. I'll never forget having an interview early on with a military officer, and I mentioned the word passionate in that interview, and he said, "Oh, that's such a weak term." I'm like, I disagreed, and I love what you said there. Is find an area in this large umbrella of what we call cybersecurity, and find an area that you are passionate about, and become the very best at it. Because that is the areas that are going to be so critical in this next generation of, and I say 10 years. Gosh, I think we're probably 3 to 5 years. I was just having a conversation with a team member. I mean, look at how fast we've progressed just in this technology of machine learning and AI just in the past 2 years. And so I think don't lose or don't grow weary, and don't lose faith that you're on the brink of being replaced, because there still needs to be that human judgment piece. We need folks that are specialists in areas, whether it's moving beyond the alert to host-based analysis, reverse engineering malware, the network forensic side, the cloud, and all that is said there, the multi-vendors, understanding that those are elements that are going to continuously need the human element to be there, to be on the loop, in the loop, and concentrating and becoming more valuable in your actual trade craft.
Yeah, I think it's from a if you look at geopolitics, our adversaries and threats aren't going away anytime soon, and so I think that we've got a lot of opportunity. I actually think times like this of transformation are a lot of fun and actually create opportunity, because most people get into cybersecurity because they don't love repetition. They love an environment that changes, and we're about to see a lot of change, and even more so than we're used to. And so I think this is a time that we can actually have a lot of fun innovating. We're going to have permission to change, not just we're required to change, but that change to come with permission. When the business is asking, how are you going to use AI? That's a different conversation than that usually is like, how can I reduce costs in cybersecurity? At least it's coming with a right and a mandate to change, and that I think creates a lot of opportunity, a lot of fun for both people and for organizations. And so looking forward to that time period.
Well, Chris, Jordan, David, thank you so much for your time. And to our audience, thank you for your time as well. At Cyberbit, we are passionate about readiness. And if you are too, we would love to share with you what we've built and get your thoughts and feedback. And thank you all, and have a wonderful day.